U.S. government officials met with an American man being detained in Russia on Wednesday. Paul Whelan is being held on espionage charges. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is demanding answers on his arrest now. CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford has more.
5 days after Russia arrested the 48-year-old former Marine for espionage, State Department officials and Ambassador John Huntsman met with Paul Whelan at this Russian prison, just hours after Secretary of State Mike Pompeo delivered a pointed message.
We've made clear to the Russians our expectation that we will learn more about the charges, come to understand what it is he's been accused of, and if the detention is not appropriate, we will demand his immediate return.
The Russians have offered no evidence Whelan, now head of corporate security for a Michigan auto parts company, is a spy. His family said he was in Moscow for a friend's wedding and told Stars and Stripes he gave wedding guests a tour of some of the Kremlin museums Friday morning, but never made it to the wedding Friday night. His twin brother, David, told CBS News he had been to Russia many times before and called it inconceivable he is a spy.
He does corporate security. It's the sort of personality that you wouldn't expect to be a lawbreaker of any sort, let alone someone who's breaking spy laws.
Whelan has a long history of military service. He spent 14 years in the Marines but was discharged in 2008 for bad conduct on several charges related to larceny. His arrest triggered speculation that Whelan got caught up in a diplomatic tit-for-tat, payback after the U.S. arrested Russian Maria Butina on espionage charges. Russian President Vladimir Putin had warned of consequences, saying, "The law of retaliation states an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth."
And Jan Crawford joins us now from Washington. Jan, the State Department seems to be pretty tight-lipped right now on what was discussed.
Oh, they have been. I mean, we've got no details on what happened in the meeting, what Paul Whelan said that was, his side of the story, which, of course, was why Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that they wanted immediate access to him and try to understand what had happened and really what the situation was. So all we know is that there was that meeting at that prison, and he remains there in detention.
Do we know at all if the ambassador talked to the Whelan family since his visit to the Russian detention center?
He did, and again, we don't know the details of that as well. All we know and what the family has said was that they spoke with the ambassador after he was able to meet with Paul Whelan, but we don't know what was said, and the family hasn't divulged those details.
Yeah, which is interesting because they have been a little bit vocal about their brother and things on social media. Does it seem as if the Russians are looking for retaliation here or some type of prison swap with Maria Butina, who admitted that she tried to influence U.S. politics at one point?
Jamie, I think that is what everyone is kind of speculating because the timing of it, the circumstances, it's just too coincidental that this has all kind of gone down the way it has. And, you saw Russian President Vladimir Putin kind of say, retaliation is eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Now, he did go on to say, look, we're not going to be arresting innocent people just so that we can exchange them for others. But Russia's security service has opened a criminal case against Whelan, and if he's convicted, he could face up to 20 years in prison in Russia. So, I mean, very grave consequences, very high stakes. And the family, while, yes, they were really kind of forthcoming, and we at CBS News, of course, have been speaking with his twin brother, they're not really sharing some of the details now, but they have been saying in the last day or two that they understand, they believe this is some kind of tit for tat, that he's not obviously a spy in their view, and they just think that they have to let these diplomatic channels play out. His twin brother, David, said that, he still had hope that the government will be able to resolve this and they'll be seeing his brother soon.
It's got to be so tough for the family there. You talked about if he is convicted, he could face 20 years. I think the other interesting point of this is he's in a really notorious Russian prison, which many describe as a dungeon. So it would be 20 years of really, just awful circumstances.
Jamie, can you imagine? Let's say, he had a great appreciation for Russia. He'd been to Russia many times before. He'd even posted images there going back years when his time was in the military and Russia, posing in front of, some tourist sites. And so, here he is, assuming his side of the story, goes over there for a family wedding, offering to help, show people around because he knows Russia and he can kind of take them around Moscow. And then next thing you know, you're like swept up and you're in this Russian prison. And the family, they heard from him Friday morning. He was giving these tours for some of the wedding guests, the family said, and then nothing. There was no contact, no response to text. And his brother said, that was really weird. He has elderly parents. He's got a dog that he would have been worried about. And then he didn't go to the wedding. And then that's when they knew something was wrong. They had worried that maybe he'd been killed.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it was in a weird way, they said, a relief almost that he was just in this prison. I mean, like, at least he was alive. And I think that's why you've seen some of this hope that it could have been worse in their view, because they had no idea what had happened to him. And it wasn't until they were Googling and trying to find out information that they saw media reports on the internet on Monday, when they hadn't heard from him since Friday, that he had been detained. So, I mean, those are the emotions that you've got to think that family is grappling with.
Yeah, such a serious case. I can't imagine being a family member right now. We're going to keep watching this one for sure. Jan Crawford, thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks, Jamie.